lift. Kasi we know that the virus crosses borders. Once you lift your restrictions in one area, and you know that the virus will cross borders, transmission will continue on.
Some LGUs are now also considering the optional use of face masks outdoors, as they did in the province of Cebu.
Dadating at dadating ang panahon, nakikita po natin na ang pandemya ay huhupa at magiging isang lokal na matter na lang po. No? So at least maaga namin pinag-aaralan na kapag ito ay nasa poder na po ng ating mga lokal na pamahalaan o sa aming lalawigan, ay nakahanda kami sa mga polisiya.
The national government is firm the mandatory mask rule stays, but the province of Cebu has passed an ordinance making it optional in open spaces. Some senators and even governors are chiming in, asking, are masks outdoors still necessary? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this edition of The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. With us here in the studio, Ed Lingao of One News. Mamaya po sasamahan din tayo ni Ami Pamituan of the Philippines Star. Ed, good evening.
Happy midweek.
Ang gagalaiti ang Army.
Ano ang Army?
Ang Army, galit na galit.
New People's Army, Armed Forces of the Philippines,
Hindi,
o
dahil
BTS?
mabubuwag ang BTS.
Happy na nga.
Akala ko, explain ko pa sa'yo.
Alam ko na yun.
Wala namang ibang mas malaking balita doon eh. Meron ba?
Hindi, kasi nung isang araw, meron silang comeback album o comeback song. Tapos kinabukasan.
Yun lang pala, Pakuspelo.
Nalilito na ako.
Muna.
Anyong hasyo.
Hindi, but seriously, ano ba mga balita binabantayan natin?
Well, of course, you're looking at yung surrender, if you might call it that. Actually, hindi surrender eh. Because he was not under arrest to begin with.
Yes.
Nagmamaneho ng SUV. So that's one.
Ito si Mr. San Vicente.
Yeah, he's already been released. Well, he's not been in captivity to begin with nga. So kasi beyond na siya ng period for inquest.
Oo nga. Tapos yun nga, kanina may kausap tayong abogado, sinasabi niya, medyo he has questions about some of the charges na pinag-uusapan because frustrated murder ang pinag-uusapan, at least it's being bandied about. But sabi niya, baka malabo yung murder.
That's too high a standard to reach eh.
Oo nga, homicide, sabi niya, baka ano.
Possible pang frustrated homicide. Sabi pa nga ng iba, baka reckless imprudence eh.
Of course, another story that we're following is still this continuing saga about whether or not masks are still mandated. Actually, there is a question, there is an answer to that. The national government has said kailangan mandatory pa rin ang mask. Of course, may banggaan sa Cebu. Cebu is saying now.
May ordinansa na sila.
Oo, may ordinansa na sila. But siyempre, mas mananaig pa rin yung national, yung pagyalang.
But the question is, walang law yung national government on that eh. Although may local law na ang no masking.
Oo. But again, the bigger picture there is basically how do we move around and how does the economy recover and start to get some movement back and in our muscles, in our mobility, and in everything that we need to get the economy back on track. So for our first conversation, joining us now is Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion. Mr. Concepcion, once again, thank you for talking with us.
Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, sir.
Robbie.
Sir, first of all, we have to say, experts, health officials are noting a slight uptick. They keep saying, tumataas ng kaunti ang mga kaso. But they also stress, hospital capacity is still very, very stable, very manageable. It will allow for even a higher rise in the number of cases. They're also stressing that everything is manageable. The worst that they've said is this might be a weak surge. But given all of that, the confidence notwithstanding, all of this talk about potentially should we go back to alert level 2, how does that make you feel?
Well, quite frankly, I think we really have to find a way how to move on. It's a mindset change. No, I just came from Europe, basically visited Spain, France, and Italy. and their protocols are very simple. No? Mask in public spaces, basically public transportation, and mask outdoors. There's no mandate for mask outdoors. Indoors in restaurants, there's even no mandate for indoors masking in indoor restaurants. No? So, being a tourist, I continue to wear my mask. No? But in the Philippines, we're not pushing for that. It's a gradual move towards really opening up and moving towards an endemic. And even a number of medical advisors are open to the idea. No? Now, when you talk about mask outdoors, to me, I would say let's just encourage mask outdoors. Let's not mandate the use of masks outdoors because we know that Omicron is a variant that is quite mild when you get sick. And hospitalizations are not even there yet. And we're focusing too much on the number of people getting infected daily. It's like we're in a microscope, no? And being so paranoid if infections do go up. And we know very clearly that Omicron, once you do get Omicron, whether you're vaccinated or not, you can still get Omicron. So vaccination does not prevent you from getting Omicron at all. What it prevents you is from severe infection and death. No? But even those that have not taken the vaccines, I'll be frank, Omicron, if they get hit with Omicron, it is mild. No? So you don't even see the hospitals getting full for the unvaccinated. And that is unique with Omicron. And one of the reasons why we are at this level is that many people, as early as February, March, during the first surge, already got Omicron. So we have natural immunity on top of the vaccines that we've given to our people. So to me, I believe mask mandate outdoors is not necessary. I think we should give it to our LGUs to make that decision. Now, mask indoors is a different story. And while other countries are very lax about it, I think the Philippines should still encourage the use of masks indoors for quite some time. And our research of Okta states that even Filipinos will continue to wear masks indoors for even beyond this pandemic. So there are two things. No? I think we should start to really move on and be relaxed about it because there is no reason to panic at this point in time. No?
But sir, at the same time, we were speaking with the Dr. Ronjin Solante last night, and he was saying na it's still very possible to catch the virus even if you are outdoors. So that puts a big question mark on whether or not we should be wearing masks outdoors. At the same time, you also mentioned what's happening now in Europe, and that's good to hear. But at the same time po, iba rin po yung infrastructure nila sa Europe when it comes to medical facilities and health services. So yun po, may ganun pong konteksto. We're wondering po what you think of that. The DOH has been consistent in saying na let's still keep our masks on indoors or out.
Well, it's a matter of how we look at things. No? And the way I look at it, Omicron is a variant that is mild. And if we do get it, in all chances, it will be mild. No? And I think we should not look at the number of infections on a daily basis. We are panicking on people getting infected. As I was in Spain for a wedding, many of the people who were going to the wedding also got infected after that. But still, look at them. I mean, in 5 days they're back, and they're I mean, it's part of living with a flu. No, when you have the flu, it's in this case, it's not flu normally is seasonal. In the case of COVID, it's 12 months of the year that you have to watch for it. But you don't see a surge in hospitals, in hospitalization in the United States or in Europe, and you don't see a surge as well here. No, we have one of the biggest elections. You saw millions of people going out, expected to really go up, these infection levels, and it started to after the whole election rallies. But you can see all the doctors will tell you that their hospitals are not full.
Good evening, Mr. Concepcion.
Oh, Ami Pamintuan, Philippine Star.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Sorry, I'm late. Well, Malacanang has announced that we will be under alert level 1 until the end of the month, until the end of the president's term. And your outlook on masking is similar to what Governor Gwen Garcia is doing in Cebu. What do you think of that debate?
Well, I think what's best is we wait for the next administration. I mean, I think with due respect to this administration, let us follow the guidelines being set by this administration. And it's maybe a couple of weeks, and I would suggest that it's best that we respect the decision of this administration and let the next administration decide the pathway of how we will be able to manage this virus. And I have discussed also with some members of the next administration that let's be open to the idea of planning to move on from a state of health emergency and removing the state of health emergency, a transition towards private sector and even the public for those who can afford to buy the vaccines, and for those who cannot afford, the government can continue to support them with the vaccines. So it's a transition of moving out from the state of health emergency and setting aside alert levels. I believe that we should remove the alert levels. It will always be there, but I think we should take it down to zero. If you look at these countries overseas who have higher case levels, they are at level 3 per CDC, but in the Philippines, we are at level 1. So by and large, I think we should panic when hospital capacity is dwindling down because of COVID patients. But if you talk to Rogin Solante, you talk to Dr. Salvania, you talk to the Dr. Herbosa, etc., the hospitals are not being stressed at all, nor is the medical support staff. So we have to focus now, to me, in which is a bigger problem, is the rising prices of everything, from gasoline to power to food, all of that. That is the biggest threat today, and unfortunately, it is basically what is happening in Russia and in Ukraine. So to me, that is the real threat. Omicron is a minor issue. Unless we get the monkey pox in this country, which I doubt, then okay, let's call it a different story. But Omicron, we know it. It's mild if you get it. And if you're fully vaccinated, you're more or less assured that it will not be severe.
We were, in fact, inevitably going to get to that. How trying to revive the economy in the middle of these shortages and these price crunches. What are some basic steps, if not steps, basic principles that we have to follow to keep the economy on track and to somehow backstop our consumers?
Well, first of all, we have to continue, opening up the economy, which we've done. Tourism is back to normal. So mobility is very important. But something that we cannot control is this huge price increases from basically everything that we import. Even logistics has gone up to the roof. Everything has moved up because of this crisis. And that is not within our control. We don't produce these products. That's why we import them. So that's the challenge we now face. And for example, as I explained before, wheat prices from $200 to over $500+ per metric ton. So these are the challenges from palm oil to milk to everything, paper to coal prices. So it's not just food, it's everything. And of course, freight as well, including the delays, because there is shortages, because maybe manufacturers, because of lockdowns in China, it's also affecting us. So these are the challenges we face, and the consumers have a limited spending power, and we cannot just keep granting wage increases, because then this will really affect us even more. So again, the consumer spending power will get weak because they can only buy much less with these rising prices, and so the manufacturers you will see that moving in the next couple of months, the financial statements of many of these manufacturers will be affected, no? Because they cannot pass on the cost at one blow. It has to be done over time so that consumers will not stop buying. No? And that's what we want to prevent, a slowing down of consumer spending, which will lead to recession. And with high inflation, you have what they call stagflation. And that is not going to be good for a country that is leveraged. No? As I was saying in our previous show, we have leveraged the Philippines because we want to grow. And there's nothing wrong with this administration doing that, because in order for the Philippines to grow, we have to invest in roads, bridges, etc. No? And we've done that. And now we have to see, because of that, the infrastructure growth should start pushing up. But you have this problem that's happening in Ukraine and Russia, this conflict, which we don't know when it is going to end. When it ends, everything will collapse. It will be back to normal. But the problem is we can't control the war. We can control pandemic, by face masks and all these vaccines. But we can't control the Ukraine-Russia conflict because we don't have any participation there.
So for the short term, do you have any ideas on how to deal with rising prices?
No, there's no way, but we have to just brace ourselves. And the impact will be felt in the coming months. And that's going to be a really problem for many. No? I mean, and that's what we as manufacturers are anticipating. And we're trying to do our best to lessen the burden on our consumers, because we know the impact of this in demand. No? If demand weakens, and then you have a problem. And this will spiral all over. No? It will not just be in the manufacturing sector. People will have less money, they will buy less cars, they will buy less real estate, and all of that. So if you have a weakened economy, everything ripples down. So, and if you start to bring up alert levels, you just make things worse. And America is increasing their interest rates. Now they're talking about 75 basis points. And that is a huge increase. No? And that will impact on us, because Filipinos now will say, okay, do we increase? The banks will increase. We can't afford to increase. Also, because what will happen to the people, especially our micro entrepreneurs, their interest rates will go up. They'll be affected severely. Now, if we don't do it, then our peso will start to depreciate, because, of course, more people will buy dollars because it has a higher yield. So these are many things that our economists will have to find the right balance. And it becomes really more challenging if Omicron, we are so ultra-conservative and we say, okay, let's bring up the alert level back to 2. Oh, then you have a superstorm. No?
Well, the transport sector is asking for a cut or a reduction in fuel taxes. Are you in favor of this?
Well, I don't know. It's best to leave that to the government. All I know is that if we all cut the taxes of the government, then the revenue of the government will just get smaller, and it will be harder for them to be paying our debts. No? So the government has to have revenues, and that's why if the economy weakens, the revenue of the government goes down. It's like my company. I bought a company, but then something bad hit us, like this war. How do I now grow? When I bought that company, I am expected to grow. When the Philippines Incorporated invested in bridges, roads, and airports, etc., and it doesn't grow, how will it pay for its debt? No, that's when your debt to GDP becomes a problem. It's just an indicator, but the infrastructure build is because we want the Philippines to grow. The entrepreneurs benefit from all of this infrastructure development that leads to growth. No, so this is the situation we are in. In other words, it's a situation that Russia, Ukraine, we don't have control. We did not start the war. We're not part of it, but we are getting hit. And every country in the world is getting hit because of this conflict. And now you have the pandemic, which in a good way, it's easing off. No, it's now going towards endemicity. And even Dr. Edson Salvani believes in such. So let's not over panic, because we have a huge problem coming our way, which is the Russian-Ukraine. But tomorrow, if the Russia and Ukraine say ceasefire, then problem solved. But will they ever do that, and how soon?
Okay.
I think, sir, one of the concerns with regard to, for example, the EU's decision to put a partial embargo on Russian oil imports is the fact that it's going to be an extended embargo. We will feel the full impact of the partial embargo in December of 2022. So what that means is that, assuming that nothing changes in terms of the war in Ukraine, hahaba pa ang problema natin sa langis. And
Yes,
that will
correct.
leave the business sector hanging in a
That's
field of
correct.
uncertainty.
So this war is causing a lot of countries, a lot of pain because sanctions that are being done, which maybe to some rightly so, to others not. But this is not within our control. We are a recipient of the blow. No, that is happening in Russia and Ukraine, and countries that are supporting Ukraine are employing these sanctions, and that is not within our control. And this is why I'm saying we have to bear with this next storm or typhoon or super typhoon that can hit us. Now, if there's a miracle that these things disappear in the next 30 days or a ceasefire is done, then problem solved and we can move on and things will rapidly change in this country. We will accelerate even more. And that's why I'm fearing that our GDP targets may not be attained if the prices continue to move up even higher.
Yeah. Mr. Concepcion, if you take out all of these crises, if you take out COVID, and for that matter, if somehow the world resolves itself and we are back to a situation where we just simply have to compete, we're still confronted with the fact that we have a lot of things to fix on our own with ourselves when it comes to our competitiveness. IMD came out and said, for example, we are 48th out of 63 economies. In our neighborhood, we are still lagging behind our neighbors. In the meantime, we're looking forward to the new administration. What should be on the program of the Marcos government as far as improving our competitiveness is concerned?
Well, I think there's still a lot of room where we can improve. We have to help our micro and small entrepreneurs be more competitive, more sustainable, not leave them to just what we call survival entrepreneurs. This is bulk of the entire business community if we were to include the micro MSMEs. And I think this is the next area. And in fact, I was able to be given the chance to speak to our president, and I briefed him on what I think we could support him. I think creating an environment that will allow small entrepreneurs to move up the ladder is very important and scale up. And this is where big business has to come into the picture. And in fairness, big business is starting to do that. No? So linking them from basically to the marketplace, and the digital economy, the digitalization is really happening right now, and digital platforms on market. So it's all happening now. And if God willing that this conflict in Russia disappears, definitely the Philippines will be much more competitive. We're just feeling the brunt right now because of all of these price increases. But I believe that the Philippines is on its way to being more competitive. No?
Okay, Mr. Concepcion, maraming salamat po. We always appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Mr.
Thank
Joey
you.
Concepcion, of course, is advisor to President Duterte on entrepreneurship. We'll take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chief Show on One News, and we now speak with Senator Sonny Angara. Senator Angara, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening, Ed, Ami, and Robbie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Sir, I'll start off with the mask mandate. Big brouhaha over what Cebu is doing. You've made your point known. Why do we insist on the mask mandate in outdoor public places? But the DILG is insisting. In fact, they're saying now that baka humantong sa panghuhuli at baka makasuhan pa si Governor Garcia. What do you think po?
Well, ako, Ed, I think maybe there's room for some dialogue between the parties here. I can understand where Governor Gwen is coming from because we're coming from a pandemic. Cebu is a province that's dependent on tourism income, no? So for jobs, for incomes, for revenue. So naintindihan ko yung point ni Governor in trying to come up with a proactive policy regarding the wearing of masks. And may basis din naman yon because pag tinignan mo all over the world, in Europe, sa America, even here in our region, sa Indonesia, they've lifted the wearing of masks outdoors, optional na lang yan. Sa Singapore, ganun din. Sa Thailand, the health minister has already recommended it to their policy, yung equivalent ng IATF nila. So it only has to be ratified by the Prime Minister. So definitely, there is science which supports the optional wearing of masks outdoors. Naintindihan ko yung requiring it in crowded or dense places where social distancing is not possible, tulad ng bus, yung bus stop, di ba? Kung yung sakayan ng bus, ng jeepney, ng tren, ng MRT, sa palengke, yun, it's understandable. We'll require masks there. Kasi social distancing is difficult. Pero yung in open spaces sa probinsya, i-require mo pa sila mag-mask. Parang hindi na, it seems a little outdated, but it seems that is the recommendation of our doctors in the IATF. I tried to ask around. Apparently, that is their recommendation. So they're trying to err on the side of caution. So siguro mag-dialogue na lang yung dalawang parties, and maybe the DILG can say, well, we won't be so strict naman in enforcing it, especially when there's little risk of contagion. Like if there's just one person walking on an empty street, i-arresto mo pa ba yun? Di na siguro, di ba? Parang let common sense prevail.
I'm sure, Senator, meron din namang mga dialogue na nagaganap. But my question is on the level of policy. Because doon po sa mga nabanggit nyo, I don't know, no? But it seems to me that generally speaking, it's safe to say that yung mga nabanggit nyo na bansa made those decisions precisely sa level ng bansa. These were national directives, and this was not necessarily just local governments deciding for themselves. Jakarta, for example, or Java, or whatever, or Sulawesi saying na hihiwalay kami sa policy ng national government. So on a policy level, does a local government passing an ordinance completely in defiance of the national policy also open a can of worms and some complexities for us?
Well, there's an impending legal dispute there that may ultimately lead to litigation or baka mahantong sa korte yan if both sides insist on their position. That's why I'm recommending a dialogue as the reasonable way forward, Robbie. No?
Pero sir, can we afford to be flexible at this point? Given how Filipinos are, required na nga ngayon, mandated pa hanggang ngayon, pero ang dami na hindi nagmamask.
You have a good point there, Ed. No? Talagang merong mga pasaway. But I think in this case, I think common sense can prevail in terms of the policy. And having said that, also, we're on the last 2 weeks of the Duterte administration also. So the new administration will have a chance to revisit that policy. And I suppose they will also be consulting the experts, and by then the situation may have changed. And they may find reason to re-examine. Baka gusto nilang baguhin yung policy, and they are free to do so.
Well, speaking of the current administration, you chair the Committee on Finance sa Senate. And what do you think of the way this administration has handled the finances for the pandemic? Kasi ngayon, there's a lot of, may mga issue dyan sa 12.7 trillion nating utang, and how are we going to pay for it? What's your assessment of our finances, the country's finances?
Well, it's been a difficult 2 years, no, Amy, no. So ako naintindihan ko yung need to borrow. Most countries actually increased their debt over the period of the pandemic because they had to deal with the pandemic, whether it's in the form of giving subsidies to their citizens or giving support to businesses. Yung various countries had their different types of stimulus plans, no, economic stimulus plans para tulungan yung mga MSMEs, and some were tourism based, some were entertainment based, some were across the board. So talagang countries increased their expenditures over the last 2 years. So I think that the administration did a fair job in trying to do so without overstepping our bounds without borrowing too much. I think we still stayed on the side of responsible borrowing. Kasi I think we're talking about a 63% debt to GDP ratio, something like that, no? So I think that's still on the side of reasonable, no? It's a little bit over our predicted 60%. Parang yun yung may informal or traditional rule yun. But in times of a pandemic, gumagalaw din naman yung goalposts or boundaries, so to speak.
Yeah, but that's your assessment of the current and outgoing administration. In the meantime, mamanahin nung incoming administration this question of precisely still, well, given all of that, however we assess it, where do we get our funds now?
We'll still have to. Traditionally, we really borrow. We really finance our budget yearly with a bit of borrowing. So I think it's traditionally been around 1/3 borrowed. So that will remain, if not constant, and probably somewhat in the vicinity of that. No? The challenge is, of course, how to meet any growing needs or growing spending, because traditionally the budget grows by a certain percentage every year. The challenge is to make revenues also grow proportionally so that you spend. And the second challenge is to spend in such a way that your spending is productive. Diba? You're spending on things which really benefit the people and which will pay dividends over the long term. So things like education, health, infrastructure. Yeah, those are the things which should not be compromised by any means. Diba?
Paano nga yan? Lumiit nga yung tax base because naghihirap mga tao, prices are, well, soaring. Lahat-lahat na, nag-aakyatan ngayon. Pati manok ngayon, mahal sa Manila. So paano yun? Saan kukunin yung revenue?
That's very true. That's why the government had to borrow money, because the revenues went down. That's why the government had to increase its borrowings. So hopefully the recovery of businesses will be quick. We've seen it happen in different countries. The US, they produced over a few months, they produced over 1 million jobs. So it's a faster than expected recovery. So it can happen with the right mix of policies and economic incentives for the private sector, a vigorous private sector-led recovery. Posible talaga mangyari yun. But the challenge nga, tama si Amy, there are challenges for the public finances. No? But once you grow, once that private sector recovers, then the public sector will benefit in the form of increased revenues and tax collection.
Mm. Sir, you still are the committee chairman of the Finance Committee. How do you view the proposal of the Finance Department for the consolidated fiscal program? We're talking, of course, about expanding the base of the EVAT, the coverage, adding adding 1 more peso dun sa oil excise taxes, road users adding sa road users tax, motorcycle tax, pickup tax, and then cutting the tax cuts or delaying the tax cuts.
Looking at, I think they're well-intentioned, the proposals, but there's 2 ways of attacking that. No, you attack it by increasing your revenues or decreasing or keeping constant your spending. So I think you have to look at both sides of the equation. Hindi lang pwedeng taas mo lang lagi yung revenue, especially in a time like this when the taxpayers or the targeted taxpayers may not be that able, given the economic environment. It may not be that capable of meeting the existing, the proposed new taxes. No? So doon tayo mag-iingat. You want to grow your economy in this period. You want it to recover. You want it to grow during this period. And increased taxation might be sending the wrong message during this time. No? So you have to look at the spending side. No? So kami sa Senate, we'll be scrutinizing the budget in a few months. We'll be looking at, is this essential spending? Will it be productive spending? Like, maybe an agency wants to build a new building. Talagang pag-aralan natin yan. Is it necessary to have that new building at this time? Maybe a new agency wants to buy
So
10
yung
new
Senate
vehicles.
building, sir.
Yeah, well, that one is already in motion. Pag tinigil mo yun, mas lalo na
Oh, mas mamahal.
you'll have it depreciate.
Yes,
So,
sir.
so that one was a decision made pre-pandemic, Ed. No, so I think that was made as early as 2017 or 2018. So that one, it will actually be productive spending because you'll be renting out certain floors of space, and in a way, you'll be spending instead of renting out, you have your own. Over time, that investment will pay for itself. So I think that can be justified on those grounds. But yes, I think that one way of looking at it is attacking the spending side. Also, you have to be more judicious, I suppose, in your expenditure, so that those debts can be paid, and the level of public debt will be manageable. Kasi debt naman per se is not bad. It's what matters more is how you spend that debt and whether it's sustainable.
Yes, sir. Sir, the incoming Finance Secretary seems to be confident that we can manage without adding or without putting in new taxes. Tingin ni Governor Jokno, o ni incoming Finance Secretary Jokno, kaya yan sa improving lang yung tax collections. Are you that confident
Well, he's familiar with the numbers, so he's probably done his homework on that front, no? But again, it all depends also on how the economy performs, because a better performing economy will lead to better revenues.
Speaking of decisions made that will have implications for our budget and the spending, we've been talking about during the pandemic. It came up quite often, the Mandanas ruling. No, we're expecting LGUs are expecting this ruling to finally be implemented. How does that affect the things that the national government will have to spend for and prioritize as you scrutinize the budget? And is there still that option to still somehow rationalize what is due the local governments under the Mandanas ruling?
Yes, the short answer is yes, Robbie. Most if not all national agencies have rationalization plans to deal or to looking forward to deal with the Mandanas doctrine, no? Which is an expansion of the tax pie that is due to local governments. So certain services will be no longer spent on by the national government, or will at least be considered maybe concurrent jurisdictions in terms of spending, meaning both the national and the local government should be held responsible or accountable for providing these services. But ultimately, pag there is a dispute, I think we really have to look at revising the local government code, because I think what some have noted, I was chairman of the Committee on Local Government not too long ago, about I think 6 years ago, in 2016 at the start of the Duterte regime. And we had the local government review, and one of the recommendations was to look at the division of the ERA, or the internal revenue allotment, which is how the national taxes are divided up among local government units. Kasi ang finding ng ibang eksperto namin on local government was that the rich seem to be getting richer, meaning the rich LGUs, cities, first-class provinces, they seem to getting, if you look at their performance over time, because they get that revenue, they're able to become richer, and we cannot take that against them, because that is something that, like a municipality aspires to be a city, because it will get a bigger share of revenues. So I think there has to be a greater emphasis on helping the poorer LGUs, the poorer municipalities. You're talking about the 4th, 5th, 6th class municipalities. In fact, I sponsored a bill which kasi we have, of our 81 provinces, we have about 28 provinces who don't have cities. And that city, for a province to have a city, that's an essential engine of growth for that province. So my bill was to back then was to ensure that all cities will have all provinces will have cities, so that they would have a greater share of the national wealth or IRA. No? Pero unfortunately that bill was not passed by the 17th Congress. No? So medyo some of the cities were opposed to that bill because it would have shrunk their share of the pie and given it to the poorer municipalities.
So I take it that will be part of your agenda in the 19th Congress, revisions in the local government code. Kasi ang sinasabi ng finance naman, Department of Finance, of course they were opposing the Mandanas ruling. Ano? Nahihirapan daw sila dun sa long-term planning, for example. At napakaraming mga projects na mas more efficient daw if it's handled by the national government.
Yeah, I can understand that viewpoint of DOF, no? Pero yung Mandanas ruling is an interpretation of the Constitution. So it would take a constitutional change if you wanted to amend or affect or change that ruling. No? So we just have to deal with it. That's the reality, and find a workaround that is still allows national government to focus on its essential services and serve the people well.
So wala
And on the
siyang
part naman,
wala pa
dagdag ko lang.
remedy.
On the part of the local governments naman, maybe the citizens should demand greater accountability, diba? Because since they are having greater power through greater resources, siguro it's also incumbent on them to be accountable for these funds and tell the people what are they going to do with the increased power and revenues.
Okay. If you don't mind, pag-usapan naman natin itong incoming Congress. Let's start with the Senate.
Sure.
We are, of course, talking to you as the chair of the Senate Committee on Finance. Ano na ba yun? Settled na ba yun? You will still be heading that committee and lahat ng nabalita settled na from the Senate presidency on down to the different committees?
The truth is, nothing is settled for the 19th Congress, Robbie, until we're actually elected on the floor, because the committee chairmen are elected by the Senate majority. So that happens on the day of the SONA, on our first day of session. That begins you elect the Senate President, you elect the Senate President Pro Temp, the Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, and on succeeding days, you will elect the committee chairpersons. So mahirap magsalita before then, Rob.
But are you expecting any surprises? I mean, Cynthia Villar already spoke. Sabi niya, no. I mean, you can count me out. And Senator Zubiri, of course, was, quite high profile, talking already about, what seemed to be a caucus among the incoming members. Let's put it this way. Are you expecting any surprises?
Not really. But I'm hoping and expecting that Senator Zubiri will be the next Senate President. I think it's a logical move for him, and he's very capable of performing that mandate, given that he was Majority Leader for several years. If you look at the past Senate Presidents, a lot of them were also majority leaders, like Senator Soto, Senate President Soto, Senate President Drilon, among others.
What about
yung
Sir
Finance Committee, ang isang malakas na, of course, yung malakas na ugong dyan is yung the new SAP, no? The super ate ng presidente is interested in the position. Kumusta naman yon? Are you interested in the position?
I think it's the majority who will decide who will be the next. Just like anything, it's a collegial body. So the majority decides. Of course, the Senate President weighs in heavily on that. But by and large, it's the majority who decides who will be the chairperson of the various committees.
Yes, sir. But are you interested still in the position?
Oh, yung mga personal preference.
Yes.
Am I
interested? Yes. I'm still interested because I'm the current chairperson, and I think I did okay in my past performance naman, and so I think I would still do a decent job if I were elected to the position.
And has Amy expressed interest in that position, whether to you or to anybody else in the Senate, or to the general public, or to the brother? I don't know.
Actually, yes. She met with me and Senator Villar
Okay.
a few months, I think a month ago, to express that they were interested in the position.
Anong sagot mo?
Sabi ko, yeah, sabi ko, pag-usapan natin because again, it's not my decision to make. Sabi ko, let's talk with our colleagues and hear them out. So I said, I'm open to. Sabi ko nga, hindi naman natin hindi natin pag-aari, kumbaga. It is something that our colleagues decide on. So yun ang sagot ko. Sabi ko, pag-usapan natin, sabi ko.
How do you see the dynamic between I mean, not just Congress, but the Senate in particular? Senators are always quite proud, depending on the situation, whether they say, no, we are a 24 republics dito sa Senate, and that can take on different contexts. But they basically mean it usually to say that, not only are we more independent, there are 24 independent minds here. But the reality is we're looking at the supermajority still at the House of Representatives, a supermajority at the Senate. How do you see the dynamics, objectively speaking, on behalf as well of people wondering about, is there even going to be any meaningful opposition, which is so vital to our democracy?
I think in the Senate, on the part of the Senate, you will have a minority composed of at least 2 senators. I think Senator Coco Pimentel, former Senate President, Senator Risa Ontiveros, newly elected, have already signified their wish to be in the minority. So I think those are 2 very capable senators. And alam mo nyo naman sa Senate, we have traditions that we preserve. One of those traditions is we don't have a rule on cloture. Cloture meaning you can cut off a member from speaking against a bill. Wala kaming ganon. So we work collegially and we give the minority their time to speak against the bill, to argue against, even if they're outnumbered, there is no railroading in terms of voting, because that's a tradition that is respected in the Senate.
I imagine people are still fixating on that's still 2 out of 24. Let's not even talk about
Yes,
Congress,
if you're talking about strict votes, but if you look at it also, Robbie, if you look at the history of the Senate, even those in the majority, there's a tradition of independence, meaning hindi dahil lang sinertify ng Pangulo, it will pass in the form that he wants, and that bill will pass, diba? Parang if you look at the death penalty, for instance, the administration was pushing for that, but napasa ba yun? Hindi naman napasa yun, di ba? Because many had strong opinions against it in the upper chamber.
Yan nga yung itatanong ko kasi there's some concern na, well, the House has traditionally been pro-administration naman, kahit sinong nakaupong presidente, but the Senate is always seen as meron kayong fiscalizing role, no? And people are worried na because of the supermajority now for the incoming president, mawawala yung role na yon. How would you describe the role of the supermajority in the Senate? Ano ba kayo? Critical collaboration ba yan? Or how would you describe it? To allay this
I would describe,
concern?
I think, I think the phrase you use is very good, yung critical collaboration, because the Senate has always, I think, been a critical collaborator or co-worker of the executive branch. Because the executive branch is the active or is the main actor in the sense, because they perform. Kami in the Senate, our role is to lay down the policies, whereas the ones who executes the policies is the executive branch. And in that sense, hindi naman pwede yung harang ka ng harang palagi. Dapat to really achieve progress, you must work together on common advocacies, on things that and that common advocacy or common cooperation between the legislative and the executive has resulted in very good laws over the years, diba? And benefits to our people. Talking about free tuition for college, talking about universal healthcare, etc. A lot of benefits have resulted from that collaboration. So just the mere fact of a supermajority, hindi ibig sabihin na rubber stamp na yung Congress. So I think if you look at the previous Congresses, the previous Senate, even where there was a supermajority, the measures, administration measures, were also scrutinized, and some may have been passed, but they were in a form that was not necessarily in the form originally proposed by Malacanang. So I think that is the role of the Senate that makes it very unique in our democracy, and that's a role worth preserving.
So you don't think there's reason to be worried na mawawala yung inherent role ng Senate to provide checks and balances to the executive? Kasi
I don't think that will ever disappear, Amy, no? Kasi that is the role talaga historically and traditionally of the Senate. The senators also have national mandates from the people. They won with their own advocacies. So I don't see them sacrificing those advocacies just for the sake of cooperating with the executive branch. They will be independent and they will help. I think even Senator Hontiveros has mentioned that they will be willing to help on common advocacies.
you're describing yourself, huh?
I'm describing each senator, I think, Amy.
Okay.
Okay. Senator Sani Angara. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Amy, Robbie, and Ed. Salamat po for having me.
And that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.